Welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. I am Michael Braithwaite, one of your hosts from Blue Door. And as always, wait a second, not as always, who is that on the screen? It is not Steph, but we are joined once again by my friend at Blue Door and my colleague, Meg. Meg, how's it going?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to step in again for Steph and excited for today's episode.
Hey, you're not stepping in, you are stepping up. Meg, I don't know if you know this about me, but I love movies. I love films. I think that, there's no other more powerful form of telling stories. I enjoy them. I've always been a bit of a movie buff. And, at Blue Door, as you're quite aware, as our marketing communications person, stories are so powerful in getting that message out and getting people to understand what homelessness looks like, what it feels like, and getting people involved in the solution, don't you think?
Yes, definitely. Storytelling is a huge part of our lives in general, and I think it's such a powerful way to understand each other. And that being said, it really relates to today's episode. So why don't you tell us a bit about who our lovely guests are for today?
Absolutely. I'm excited about today's podcast. First of all, we have Karen Mongran, who is a participant in the documentary film Us and Them, which we're going to talk about today too, and was experiencing homelessness on Canada streets for 20 years. She's been housed for several years now and has been working with Us and Them producer Krista and Karen on her new film about their 15-year friendship. And speaking of that friend, we also are joined by Krista Loudon, who's a documentary filmmaker whose work revolves around the issues of homelessness and addiction. She participates in her first feature film, Us and Them, and is also the producer, co-director, and co-writer. The film spans over 10 years, while Loudon befriends 4 homeless people in an attempt to help them, but in the end, they end up helping her. Not surprising. She has spent the last 18 months shooting a new film about a homeless encampment. Excited to hear more about that. Her lens was attracted to a neighborhood association who stepped up to help the unhoused campers in their local park when the government failed to respond during the pandemic. Please welcome Karen and Krista. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We ask this question to everyone who comes on the show. So what we'll do is we'll start with Karen with this question, then we'll move to you, Krista. So it's a pretty simple question, but different for everyone. What does home mean to you?
What does home mean to you? Well, home means, when I moved away from where I was, and I moved into this apartment, well, first I didn't like it. But I like it because it's home to me now. And that I got my Krista here with me. I call her sister. And if I need help or stuff like that, she helps me a lot. She's the only person that I could go to. And there's another person, she's not homeless, but she needs help, so I try to help her at home. She's in the same building as I do. And me and her and Krista, sometimes I talk to Krista if I have a problem, and that woman's got a real problem. She's trying to, do things different way about her life and stuff like that, and I'm trying to get her out of it. So I have to stay home and, look after her, talk to her, and be beside her most of the time. But now she's in the hospital, so I'm okay without that. So home is a home, because I got Krista and my friends with me. That's, staying sober.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
And I think home it's safety and security, a place where you can be, a place where there's warmth and comfort. I've learned a lot more about the idea of home from Indigenous friends that I've met along the way on this path. And home in an Indigenous perspective is much more than bricks and mortar walls. It's much more than a dwelling. It's about connection and relationship and family, the land. It's more, it's about, I did some work with with Jesse Thistle. We interviewed him before the pandemic for something I was working on, and we talked about it a lot. And it's about, like, it's not about housing people, it's about homing people. So it's a feeling more than just a bricks and mortar dwelling. So it's that, sense of comfort and belonging. And like, I know with Karen, like when you moved into the place you're in right now, in the very beginning, she kept going back out, even though she had a house or a roof over her head. She kept going back out to the street to just be with her friends, because that's where the heart of her home was. Like, her home and her heart was still outside. But then that changed after a while, and as you settled into where you are.
Not really.
No?
Sometimes when I get mad at you know, the family that I got at home, which I call home, I just, feel like packing up and just go straight back out to be with my street family out there. And they usually sit down with me who I'm talking about, Jamie and then Paul.
Yeah.
They'll sit down and talk to me. It's not to go out there. You're too old for that nowadays. You can't make it out anymore and this and that. So that changes me quickly.
But that's where your family is.
That's where my family is outside.
So
still.
And so you're drawn to that.
Yeah.
So that, in the sense, is home too, right?
It is. Like, it's kind of hard for me to look at them. Every time I go to town, I see them sitting, where the cubby hole by the basement. Of course I see them, talk to them. If I got a little bit of something, I give it to them. And when I get home, I feel so sad. I want to go back with them again. And some of them usually tells me, Mom, just come home. Just come back with us. Like, show us the rope. Like what I did outside all of these years. And my late husband and I, they want me to show them my dad ropes. But I told them I couldn't do it because, my arthritis is not good for the winter and everything. So I just got to be where I am right now. I'm still trying to move out of that hellhole. That's what I call it. They moved me to a little 2x4 building.
It's a small 1-bedroom apartment, but you're inside,
But if I hear you both correctly, home is really where your family is, right? Where your family and friends are. So home it's not, as Krista, you were saying, it's not about those bricks and mortar walls. It's where the people are. So thank you both for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Krista, a few years back, you produced and created the moving film Us and Them. So for those of us who may not have seen it, can you tell us a little bit about the film and what inspired you to make it?
Yeah, it's the film is about my experience befriending four chronically homeless people, and like it was mentioned in my bio, they, I reached out to try to help them, but they ended up helping me. So I didn't set out to make the film that I created. It's just how it evolved, and I think that's why it spans over 10 years, and I think that's why it took so long to do, because it was really real. Like, once I entered into those worlds and created relationships with these four people who, I don't know, we really cared about each other. We really had strong connections between each other. And then, sadly, one passed away, and in filmmaking, like, if you're writing a fiction film, a main character will have an unconscious desire and a conscious desire, or an inner and an outer need. And really, screenwriters are trying to base things on reality, and I think that's actually what happened to me. Like, my conscious desire, my outer need, was to try to help the homeless, but my unconscious desire, or my inner need, was to help myself. And that came up while I was making the film, and I had to go and deal with that. So, yeah, and so that's what happens in the film. And the inspiration for it was, I think that my dad was in international development. He was a university prof, and then started doing curriculum development at universities overseas. And when I was about 18 or 19, I went to go visit him in Harare, Zimbabwe, where he was working on a project. And I grew up in Brandon, Manitoba, and I had never seen poverty like I saw there. 80% of the population were sleeping on dirt floors every night. And I always wanted to go back to Africa to try to help, but life just didn't take me there. And I realized eventually, I don't need to go back to Africa to help people. I just need to go downtown. So without any experience of homelessness or ever being I had never even stepped foot in a drop-in center. I just went and started looking for people that were suffering the most in my own community. And I wanted to make a film about it. It was always about making a film about it. So that was the inspiration and how it began. But there was a big evolution from there.
And Karen, you are one of the 4 people featured in the film. Can you share with us how this came about and what your experience was and how you felt seeing your story shared on the big screen?
Tell you the truth, I'm in there. What did you say when you lose somebody you believe?
Yes.
Well, I was a heavy drinker. I've always been ever since I was a little girl. I used to steal booze from my family and this and that. I got married, and my husband and I moved down here. We were drinking. We were panhandlers. We panhandled to make our money for booze and for something to eat. Mostly for booze, I think, because we got all the street family with us. When I lost him, I don't know, I met Krista. And the first time I met her, I didn't even know her. I told her, I love your sister. And that's when we started making a film. I'm still grieving about my husband, but I can't get away from it. I'm trying to. That's why when sometimes I get mad, I want to just go back out and do things that I used to do. But I can't. But now, like I don't mind about this film as long as people, see what's going on, what had went on with me in the future and the movie that we're making. Maybe you get their minds into it and start thinking about what the years coming back to them. And, to me, I truly hope they think the positive way to stop doing what they're doing right now. Because it's kind of cold out there. It's like kind of it is. And in the wintertime, we don't get snow, just get rains all the time. But they can get sick right away and go back to the hospital. This and that. I've been there. I had a bad pneumonia. First time. I just about died. But lucky I had a friend that survived me. And I still, love that guy until today. Anyway, I don't know. It's up to them how they feel about watching the other movies that we're making. I know a lot of people really thank me for what I've been doing. I'm really proud of that.
Karen, how has the movie impacted your life? So it's been a number of years since it's come out, since you've seen yourself larger than life on the big screen.
It's hard for me to look at it when I didn't mind making it with her, being on that movie, but when I watch it, I don't know, I just tell Chris I don't want to watch it, I just want to be outside. Like when she's showing the film. It's still sad for me, because it makes me think of what I went through. Now my life's changing. It feels like I really do want to go back out, but when I'm home alone, I pray, praying to God to help me not to go back out there, being what I went through. And you know what? That helps me a lot. But I don't know. It's I don't mind making film with her, but to tell you the truth, I don't like watching that movie. It just makes me so sad.
Karen came to a lot of screenings, and we just stopped. Like, we would go and we'd introduce the film, and then we would go and we'd leave the theater and then come back with a Q&A. But she always loved to pop her head back in at her big joke at the end. There's a really funny joke at the end where she says, I don't want to spoil it alert for people who haven't seen it, but remember, you'd always want to pop your head back into the jokes, right? But it is pretty, I mean, it's real. Like, Nelda, one of the other characters, when we were making it, always used to say, like, I don't want to sugarcoat this. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. Like, it needs to be real. So we were all very open about our experiences. So, you don't need to be reminded of it. And it always worried me that I didn't want to re-traumatize Karen by having, like, we don't need to watch it over and over again.
No, I watch it once.
Well,
Okay.
and you being brave enough to share your story, and as painful, like looking back at some probably the most painful and challenging times in your life, you've made a huge impact on a lot of people, and this film's been very impactful to thousands who have seen it. Krista, why do you think that it's stuck with people so long after they've seen it? It's a very powerful story.
Well, I think it's really real, and it's also we lose. The audience gets very connected to the unhoused people on screen because they're all just really great people that have ended up in severe poverty, and I think that the audience really connects with everyone, and then we lose people, right? And so by the time, and then also Gabor Mate, questions me about my need to relieve pain in the world, and when my childhood experiences come up on screen, I think the housed audience members that are watching it, like, everybody can relate to that because none of us get through childhood in a perfect way, or very few of us do. We can all, I think, as people watch me talking about what happened during my childhood and what created the issues with depression that I had to work with, the audience will be reflecting on their own. And then when we come back and say, we're the same, it's just that my unhoused friends have suffered more. And then Denalda corrects me on that so eloquently and beautifully. Hell is hell. We all have our own versions of hell. So she doesn't let me slip away from, like, she validates my pain, even though it's not the same as hers. She didn't let me say that. If this makes sense. But, and I think then people really are really feeling emotional and then are able to connect with the unhoused in a way that they never have before. So when the lights come up, people are just like, whoa, I had no idea. And people really do. And this is what I wanted to achieve in the edit suite. It was, I wanted people to leave the theater and not look at an unhoused person the same way again. And we achieved that. I also had very skilled filmmakers working with me because this was my first film. So the co-writer and co-director, Jennifer Abbott, she brought a lot to the table in terms of skill and filmmaking skill, and we had a skilled camera operator, a DP. Like, there was a lot of good people around me to help make it what it is. And I just wanted it to be as good as it could possibly be. So I poured in, like, all my heart, really, and all the talent that I could possibly squeeze out of myself into it so that it would be what it is. It was more than a film to me. It was a real, it turned into my life. Like, my life and this movie were the same. So I think that because of that, there's just something really special, even just in the energy of the whole production too. And the people, like Karen, I mean, everybody wants to know how Karen and Eddie are doing after they watch it. I think they just, like, people's hearts open up to you and they want to know that you're doing better. And people just really begin to care.
And as you said, Krista, the film spans over 10 years, and in your bio you talk about starting this film with the thought of helping these 4 individuals, and then in the end they end up helping you. So I'm wondering if you can expand on this statement and just talk about that a little bit more for our listeners.
Well, yeah, again, without spoiler alerting too much, like it just, I guess as I got closer to people and as the situation got a lot more intense, like I was, kind of in over my head when the first person passed away, and I had to really look at what my motivations were, which Dr. Gabor Mate points out to me. But without having endeavored on this or tried to help my 4 friends, brothers and sisters, I wouldn't have looked at that. I wouldn't have explored that. And then when I open up to them afterwards about my issues with depression and struggling with depression, they just offer me such wisdom and love. Eddie says, "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you talk about it?" And Danelle just gives me some beautiful advice at the end. Well, it's either a breakdown or a breakthrough, and how she's cheering me on, and they really support me. And that is one thing that I think a lot of documentary filmmakers or social workers wouldn't do. They don't open up with their clients. There's even a different way. Like I think of them as, Karen is my sister. She's not my subject. She's not my client. I'm not that, or it's different. And that really, it's not supposed to be done that way, but I did it that way. And I think it really made us closer because they could tell me their struggles and I would tell them my struggles. And I tell you, when I would tell them my struggles, holy, the empathy coming off the ones that know what it's like, there's nothing like it. They really supported me and really helped me. And, 15 years later, we're still friends doing the same thing, right? We're still just friends supporting and helping each other. But without, as I said, endeavoring on this whole film, I wouldn't have been able to work through my depression in the way that I did. And to be able to take that pain and transmute it into something that is beneficial to my society so that my pain isn't wasted. That's really important to me, too. I think if we can do that, and including people with lived experience in all these conversations and being able to take those lived experiences and use them for the greater good and for positive change. I'm really into that right now. Really into that. Not that I have just supporting my friends with lived experience to participate in advocacy work and social change.
Definitely. You're working on a new film around encampments, something we've all heard more of over the past 2 years during the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit more about this new endeavor?
Well, yeah, you see, with Us and Them, it's really about childhood trauma and how that relates to homelessness and addiction. But I felt like I wasn't finished with the topic because I didn't even begin to start talking about the systemic reasons behind homelessness, the disinvestment into social housing over the last 35 years, deinstitutionalization of mental health facilities, colonization, kids aging out of care, all these other systemic reasons behind it of why people who are severely traumatized are the ones that are more susceptible to falling victim to the streets. And so I wanted to make a film about that, and I was in the process of doing that when the pandemic hit, and everything changed when the pandemic hit. Where I am in BC, like the things that we thought were really important, like just housing, first of all, getting people's basic needs taken care of, and then other things like different ways of treatment or safe supply, helping people who are addicted. All of like safe supply started happening here too, and our provincial government bought or leased hotels, and people were like, I think we housed about 600 people almost in 6 weeks, don't quote me on that, there was, I think, at least 450 people in 6 weeks because of the pandemic got housed. So what the pandemic showed us is we can do this. Why haven't we been doing this? And also in BC, they opened up safe supply or safer supply. There's still problems with that. It's not accessible enough to people. That could be a whole other conversation, but that did start happening. But at the same time, there was a lot of people who didn't want people camping in the park. So there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of community resistance. Some people might refer to it as NIMBYism, not in my backyard. I try to be more, empathetic and open with people who are struggling with that, with the community resistance. But it was those voices were pretty loud, and it's really hard to get people their basic needs during the pandemic. Then I found a neighborhood association, or crossed paths with a neighborhood association whose local park had been taken over by an encampment, I think 112 tents at its peak. But they decided to reach in and help rather than, really rallying against City Hall or threatening to withhold property taxes or all the various kinds of things that we've seen. The anger that we've seen about encampments and about just taking over parks and just the issues, because there are a lot of issues that come along with that. I'm not naive about what happens there, but it's really challenging work. And this neighborhood stepped in to help, and they started doing weekly meetings, and they joined forces with the unhoused, and it was a really amazing thing to see. So I just started filming that, and that without that neighborhood association, things would have been a lot different for those campers. And they ended up setting up an interim encampment on a parking lot. The park that they were in flooded, and they all were moved to a parking lot. But it was everything that happened with the government was all reactive. It was all because it had to happen, right? And I happened to be there the day that it flooded, and I filmed it, so that there's an embarrassment factor there, right? And so this encampment was set up on a parking lot, and it was the best interim solution that I've ever seen to encampments. So that's what that film is about. And a lot of it became self-managed. There was a service provider there. They got a warming tent. The tents were set up on pallets with plywood on top, so they were up off the ground. There was a Red Cross grant that the neighborhood association had applied for before this happened, so that helped support some stipends for cleaning and doing work around it. And it was actually it wasn't perfect, but it was a really good basic model that I think other places across the country could use. And in fact, in the beginning of December, we're all getting back together. We're going to regroup and debrief 6 months later and talk about what went wrong, how we could have done better, and we'll hopefully end up with a framework of running an emergency encampment when there's not enough shelter spaces or housing available for people. So that's what that's about. And lots of lived experience voices doing advocacy work. So I'm really excited about it. It's good people. It's really a great experience to be proud of.
And we're looking forward to it. And I'm going to ask you a little more about that, but I do want to, how many years, Krista, has it been since the film was released? Us and Them.
It came out in 2016, so it's been 5 years. Been
about 5 years. Okay, so Karen, it's been 5 years since that film came out. We couldn't end this podcast without knowing, how's it been going over the past 5 years? How are you doing now?
I've been doing okay. Well, mostly I just stay home because of this COVID. I'm scared to go out.
Yeah.
Nothing else to do, just stay home, watch TV, lay around, talk on the phone with your friends.
What's your favorite shows?
NCIS.
Awesome. Good choice. Well, we're so happy, and I want to thank you for sharing your story, having the courage to do that. Know that you changed lives, you've had impact, you created empathy in the sector. When people see that story, sometimes we're asked, what does homelessness look like? And we say it's not about a look, it's about a feeling. You convey that feeling, and Krista, you do this throughout the film so well with these four wonderful people. And I think it leaves people wanting to take action and to support. You leave them with hope. It's a film about hope. So if people haven't seen this movie, where can they see Us and Them? And when can we look forward to the release of your new movie?
Well, Us and Them is on. The only place you can watch it is Vimeo on demand. But you could go to the website, Us and Them, and it's all spelled out, USANDTHEM, thefilm.ca. And there's a link there for watching at home, to stream at home. Or you can go onto Vimeo on demand and search for it there. There's also we're still doing quite a number of community screenings. So if you go to the website, I need to update that, but I will. And to see virtual screenings, different things that you could participate in. Quite often we're involved in them as well. So check that out too. And the next film, we're doing at the end of January, there's going to be a short film released. It's tentatively titled 940 Caledonia, which is the address of the parking lot where that encampment was set up. And it's just above that. I'm working with the Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness. We're partnering on it, and it is really just about that encampment. And then there'll be a longer film that I'm aiming for, probably, summer or fall 2022 for the longer one to come out. And we're still looking for a home for that. Hopefully we'll find a broadcaster, or because it would be really great to be able to have it on television, or CBC Gem or something like that. So we're going to work really hard to do that, but it's also very competitive and hard to do. So we'll see what happens. But we can always just release it like we did with Us and Them, just have it be like a self-distributed piece. But yeah, we're working on all those moving parts right now. So within the year.
Yes, thank you. I know we'll be excited to see that short film, and I want to encourage all our listeners to stay tuned for that and check out your website as well. And I want to thank you both, Krista and Karen, for joining us on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Meg, listen, I watched Us and Them. I've watched it a few times. Krista was good enough a while back. We were actually on a panel together, and I said, if you could send me the link, it's been a while. So I rewatched it and was so glad that I did. So I encourage people, see this film. It will change your lives. The courage of these individuals. And it is such a passion project. Watch this film. Be part of the solution. And, Meg, I am so looking forward to Krista's next film. And hopefully people will go out and droves to see that as well, because she's so talented in sharing these powerful stories.
I totally agree. I'm so excited to see the next film, and it was such a pleasure to hear more about Us and Them. Such a great episode today.
Yes, and having Karen on too, to come back and talk with us. We always love having the voices of lived experts like Karen on the show, so wonderful to have her here. Krista and Karen, two awesome people making impactful things happen. Another great episode of On the Way Home. Meg, we will see you next time.
See you next time.